Hey, I am Michael Spath for another edition of Journey to the Top, a C-suite conversation. And joining me on this episode is Ned Staebler, the president and CEO of TechTown Detroit, in the heart of Detroit. And we'll come back to what TechTown is in just a little bit. But Ned, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to see you and to get to talk about, really important issues in our community.
So, Ned, I would like you to go back. This is how I've started every podcast so far. Whether you pick your, little Ned at 7 or little Ned at 8. But when you were a kid, do you remember what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Wow. Well, first of all, I'm 6'7". I was never little Ned. You know, and what did I want to be when I grew up? I don't think I was a fireman or a policeman or any of that kind of stuff. Maybe an astronaut.
Okay. Okay. Did you take steps towards making that happen, or was there a realization point when you were a teenager that maybe walking on the moon was not in your cards?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure by the time I was a teenager, I was pretty sure I wasn't going to be an astronaut. But you know, to be in all honesty, by the time I was a teenager, I think I had realized that my calling was in public service.
Mhm.
I always wanted to give back to my community. I think part of that was my family history. I come from a family that has been in public service for a long, long time. They moved to Michigan in 1831, and as early as the 1880s and 90s, were in some sort of public service and really unbroken for the last 100 plus years. And then that was followed up by going to U of D Jesuit, whose motto is "meant for others." And so, we were taught that we were on third base, but we didn't hit a triple, and that we needed to ensure that we were giving back to the community that helped us be as successful as we had been. And so, I always wanted to do something that was going to be, giving back to my community and making the world a little better place.
Well, I love that, and we'll get into that because you certainly, in your role at TechTown, do just that. It's an organization that is extremely dedicated to the Detroit community, to entrepreneurs and startups, and all those people looking to, realize their American dream by becoming the next big thing. So we'll get to that shortly. Do you think when you were a teenager that you ever said to yourself, like, you know what I'm going to be someday? A CEO.
I'm sure, like most teenagers, I had no idea what a CEO was or what they did or anything like that. So, pretty unlikely that was on the list. Much more likely to be a fireman or a pro athlete. We all thought we were going to be pros for a minute.
Well, Ned, I mean, after graduating from Harvard, it looks like you did a couple of things, but where did your career start? Like, what was the first job out of college for Ned Staebler, and how did that mesh with your expectations for yourself coming out of college?
So, my inflection point was actually in college, early in college in 1992. I showed up at Harvard. I was a government major, was studying sort of public policy because I was going to go and, give back in terms of public service, maybe run for office someday. And if you remember in 1992, there was the presidential debate between Bill Clinton and Bush 1. And politics aside, I just remember thinking that here were two guys that were very out of touch. I remember thinking that if I was ever going to have an impact on public policy, I ought to figure out what that meant for how public policy impacts real people. You had George Bush, who didn't know what a gallon of milk cost and didn't know what those scanners were in the supermarket. That was kind of a scandal. And then Bill Clinton had never really had a real job. He was a law professor for one semester before he ran for attorney general and later on governor of Arkansas. So I remember thinking that wasn't the best way to do public policy. You ought to have people that were really connected, having more influence. So I decided I would go out and quote, see the real world, learn how things work. And like any good 20-year-old, I figured, oh, I'll just do that for 2 or 3 years, then I'll know how the world works, and then I can go back to public service. So my first job out of college was actually with what today we would call an early stage fintech. But back then we just called it a trading firm. But we were doing proprietary risk modeling and early days of algorithm-based trading, first in Chicago and then later in London. And I did that for almost a decade before I woke up and said, wait a second, I was supposed to do this for like 2 years, figure out how the world works, then go back and do public service. And instead I woke up and I was living, in London, 3,000 miles away from home, trying to make money every day instead of doing something useful for society. So that was my first big inflection point.
Well, I mean, it didn't, I guess it did take a decade, Ned, for you to realize it. But when you came home, it seems like you immediately jumped into serving the community by working for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and in a role, from reading your resume, entrepreneurial and capital services. So, I mean, immediately it looked like you were jumping into like, hey, how can I help the little guy become something that they've always dreamt about being.
That's exactly it actually. Is so the day I woke up saying, wait a minute, I was supposed to be doing public service, I instantly couldn't be at the bank anymore. At that point, the little firm I had bought, I worked at, had been bought by Bear Stearns, a big global money center investment bank, and I was now just a little cog in a big machine, and I woke up and said, I gotta quit. So I dropped out. I left the bank and I went to grad school at the London School of Economics, and I was studying sort of comparative politics and political economy, and I learned about this thing called economic development, and really was enthralled by it. I wrote my dissertation on state level economic development policy, how U.S. states were responding to globalization. Remember the 90s and early 2000s? That was sort of the big topic. And I used Michigan as a model and said, okay, so what works? What doesn't work? What should we be doing? Where should we be focusing our resources? And I had interviewed a bunch of folks at the MEDC for it. So when we moved back to Michigan, I ended up getting a job there, and it was a great way to put my academic background, studying first public policy and then economic development, and then my professional background, working in banking and finance and business together, because I spent the next 5 years trying to create programming and public policy that would support the growth of small businesses, of venture capital and private equity, and the financing industries that help to create a business environment and business climate that work for all types of businesses.
Ned, in that role with the MEDC, did you find yourself in a leadership position? I mean, obviously you had a lot of, you were trying to implement policies, but you also had all these entrepreneurs. Were they interacting with you? Were you starting to take on a role of responsibility?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Were you in a leadership role when you were at the MEDC? Were you starting to find yourself in a position?
No, I mean not on day one. That was
Yeah.
really interesting actually, is that I was leaving an investment bank where, I had a very nice salary, I had a title that was great, and they give away titles like candy in investment banks. I think I was an associate director or something like that. But I had three vice presidents that reported to me, at the age of 27 or something like that, because titles are cheap. You can give those away without paying people. And when I came back to work in state government, I really was like, I got to start all over again, because I had no background experience, no credibility in some ways. I worried that my skills wouldn't be transferable into that world. And certainly the salary was a big pay cut to do it. In fact, I remember lying on my application form about what my salary. I didn't lie. I put the best possible spin on what my salary was. I made it much lower because I didn't want to not get considered for a job because they'll say, oh, he needs to be the boss. And I applied for, I think originally maybe an assistant director's job or associate's job. I don't know. It wasn't quite entry level, but it was definitely not management. But I very quickly got promoted up through the ranks. When I got hired, I think they already knew that the guy I was going to work for was leaving in a few months. And so they were hiring me to sort of step into his role as a director relatively shortly.
So what did you start to learn about yourself when you moved into the director role? I mean, this podcast is called Journey to the Top. It's about C-suite, and inherently C-suite is synonymous with leadership. And so I'm curious what you started to learn about yourself. And you're a fairly introspective person. Obviously, although maybe those years at the bank you took a little bit longer to be introspective. But what did you start to learn about yourself and how you need, what type of tools and resources you needed to integrate into who you were to become, the type of person and type of manager you needed to be at that role?
Well, you're right. I'm pretty introspective. I'm a big believer in continuous learning and continuous improvement, and have brought that to bear at every step along the way. And one of the things I learned pretty quickly is that leadership is a skill. It's a muscle. And I think you frequently in business promote your best salesperson and make them the sales manager. Well, that's a different job than selling, managing people and leading teams. And you got to, like any other muscle, you got to build it up. And I will say that my first when I first started managing people, I think I was pretty bad at it. You're still struggling. I was your peer yesterday. Now I'm your boss. Are we friends? Or what kind of relationship do we need to have? How do I ask you to do things or tell you to do things? Do I yell at you? Do I, you trying to figure out what your style is? So, I think I learned right away. I had a lot to learn, and I needed to spend a lot of time, reading and learning about the different uh, sort of techniques that you could use to be a better leader and a better manager. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that, reading that, taking trainings, and getting professional development to help make myself better.
I mean, fast forwarding a little bit here, and we will take a step back in a second, but looking at your leadership style now, how much do you think, to what you just said, learning it as a skill is an absorption of other people's leadership styles and the books you've read and the classes you've taken and bringing it all together, or kind of just reading all that stuff and saying, okay, then this is who I want to be as a leader.
Yeah, you have to be yourself, right? I mean, one of the things I think is the most important is to be authentic. People know pretty quickly if you're putting on a front, and will not buy in. People want their leaders to be authentic. They want them to be real people that they can relate to. They don't need them to be perfect. They just want to know that they can trust them, that they're consistent. And so, I have had some leaders that have been really good, and I've tried to take the parts of what they've done that I've thought was useful. And I've had some leaders that have been pretty bad. And sort of like everyone wants to be a little better parent than their own mom or dad, right? You're gonna do that, and it's the same thing with leadership. You're gonna try to take the best of it and get rid of the other stuff. But I also think that subconsciously, some of the traits that you had sort of built into you come out, and being willing to recognize that you're not perfect and you need feedback from people is super important. I've always had a lot of mechanisms for getting feedback, whether they're 360s or open door policies or anonymous tip lines or whatever, because I want to hear from people, what's not working. But then those are just data points, because you'll get one person tell you the room is too hot and another person who tells you the room is too cold.
Yeah.
So you also have to remember that's another thing you learn along the way is you can't make everybody happy.
Yeah.
In fact, part
Yeah.
of leadership is finding the way that minimizes that while achieving your goal.
Well, Ned, that's a great segue because I'm really curious, and I've talked to other leaders who have said something similar. So if you have five over here and five over there saying, hey, we think you're a great leader because of X, Y, and Z. Wait, we think you're a bad leader because of X, Y, and Z. How do you reconcile that? How much do you just put your head down and say, I'm gonna go because as you just said, I'm not gonna make everybody happy. But, to be the best, somehow you've got to be able to speak to both sides of that.
Yeah, it is hard. I mean, it's funny if you were to ask me, like, all right, what's the model that when you look at leaders and you say that's who you'd want to be. I think I'd probably come back to someone like a Ted Lasso. And I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from that show. One is that he's very much a servant leader, but he's like, I'm going to go and give to each person what they need to bring their best. to it. And all he really cares about is, what are the outcomes that the team can create? And he knows that if he can bring the individuals level up and get them to interact really well, that the whole team will be successful. But if you go into the second season, he also discovers that in doing that, he burns himself out and has his own challenges that he's not dealing with, which I think is very important for a leader. And so I think the answer is you need to give different things to different people. So yeah, some people will say, I don't like it that he's so direct. I wish he was a little more, touchy feely. And other people are like, I wish he was a little more direct, right? Like, okay, as a leader, I think you need to give to people what they want and what they need. Now, look, when you're hiring, when you're building teams, I think we have natural proclivities. We're going to more likely to hire people that are going to fit. You hear the term fit a lot in the culture that we're creating. But sometimes, you'll get somebody who has a particular skill set, but they don't react as well to the directness, for example. So it's your job as the leader to tailor your style for the team members that you have. I mean, if you really want to be successful.
So you have an Excel document, every single employee listed, and next to it, I got to be direct or
Yep.
indirect, direct, indirect, direct, indirect.
Absolutely. I use Outlook every 5 minutes. I put in there, think about this. No, of course not, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
wouldn't be practical. Although I'll tell you, if you go and take, a Zing train thing at Zingerman's or something like that, which I have done a lot of. I'm a big fan of their training. I've done them, and I've had my whole team go through various trainings to think about different ways to be more effective. But one of the things they do is things like that. They keep a list of, the little treats and things that a staff member might like. And everyone has access to it. So if you see somebody's having a bad day, you can say, "Oh, that guy, he likes burners or something," and you leave one on his desk. It's a nice little pick me up, things like that.
Yeah.
So I think there's neat little tricks you can do too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I think too, the delegation, right? I mean, maybe you can't have your finger reaching into 1,000 employees, but you can respond, the way that you need to 20 of them. And then it's important that those 20 are able to reach the next 30 and those 30 reach down the way. I've heard that from a person who worked with 10,000 employees. But I was curious, you're now becoming a different person, or maybe not a different person, but you're moving into different roles than you were when you first got out of college. You go to Wayne State, you're there for a couple of years, and then this opportunity comes with TechTown, and so that's when the title came. So you got another title, whether or not it was earned or not, based on your earlier conversation. But this one is president and CEO. So I don't know that TechTown gives that away as easily as the bank does. But what did that mean to you, and why did you say to yourself, "Hey, I am ready to be, officially, unofficially, the guy at the person at the top"?
Well, why did I say I was ready? I don't know. I think a lot of folks think they're ready even when they're not, and it's a little like having kids. There's never a perfect time. You're never going to be ready, fully ready for something. Because, like I said, it's a muscle. You're going to start out weak, and you're going to need to get stronger over time. So that opportunity arose, and I like to think I was ready, and I did a pretty decent job. But I definitely am not as good. I was not as good then as I am today at it, in terms of being a leader and helping to put a team together. But I think you're ready for it at a sort of a CEO level once you've done it in other settings. So certainly at MEDC, at Wayne State before TechTown, I put a team together. I mean, it was just me. And I ended up going out and getting a bunch of grants and hiring a bunch of people and building a team. And I had done the same thing at MEDC, growing the 21st Century Jobs Fund and hiring a bunch of folks to successfully implement some programs. So it is very different to be a CEO. I heard a great analogy not long ago that as you move up the corporate ladder, it's a little bit like climbing a tree, that you start out and you're in the middle of the tree and you're on a thick trunk or very thick branches, and there's you're buffered from the outside by lots of leaves and other branches and things. But as you get higher, the branches get a lot skinnier and there's not as many leaves protecting you from the outside. So, in the tree analogy, it's wind and rain and, you might, a squirrel running by and you might be on a thinner branch. But in the CEO world, or as you move up in a corporation, now it's politics. Now it's finances. Now it's, macro economic forces, things like that. That when you're one of 10 directors, you got to worry about your own little problem, but you're sheltered from some of those other things by board politics or the I don't know interest rates by your boss or your boss's boss, and you have all your other directors that you can talk to about, hey, how do we handle this? How do we do that? And they're generally probably on your team. As you move up, now you're a vice president. Well, maybe there's only 2 or 3 of you. Well, now you're vying maybe for the CEO job, and so maybe you're not as collaborative, and you're maybe more competitive, and you're responsible for a whole lot more of the world, and you're more affected by interest rates or sales or political wins or things like that. So you build that network up, and then both you get stronger in terms of your skills and your base, but you have to be, because you're moving up into a world where the problems are of a higher magnitude and you have less support. So that's the balance I think you got to find.
You have been, I don't know if you've celebrated your anniversary at the time of this recording. It says on your LinkedIn, it was March of 2015. So it looks like it's a 10-year anniversary right around this time that you've been at TechTown. Has it been, I mean, when you look at it, I'm curious in knowing you a little bit, the stability that you've been able to bring to TechTown, is that a strength for TechTown? Is there a part of you that's always having to reimagine yourself a little bit to give, as you just mentioned, a lot of those different things, the wind and the rain and the squirrels, that you're having to reimagine your role a little bit each year as you're facing new challenges? I'm curious the stability of 10 years versus like coming in for 4 or 5 and someone putting their imprint on it and moving on to something else.
Yeah, that is a really great question. And it's something that we both teach to our clients, and then we have to think of ourselves. And that's a recurring theme here, is because, a lot of what TechTown does is to help people start and grow businesses. Well, we are a business, right? So are we walking the talk, right? Or are we talking the walk? I don't know. Are we doing what we say, what we're teaching, right? Do as I say, not as I do. I don't know. Pick your adage. But um, so, when I started at TechTown, it was a 18-person organization with about a $4 million budget. Last I looked, we were 60-ish with $18 million. But I think we'll probably shrink a little bit given the environment we're in right now. And you got to remember that's okay. The goal is to have impact, and are you fulfilling your mission? Not about, is your organization big and is your kingdom or fiefdom big? But as we've grown, it's been a lot of challenges. They have changed significantly. And, I have had to grow, but I've also learned a lot about, do I want to be, which part do I like better? The growing part, the maintenance part, the constant improving part. There's some people that are really good at starting businesses and helping them get up to 2, 4, 5 people. And that's it. They don't want to be the person to take it from 5 to 20 or from 20 to IPO. I mean, those are very different skill sets, and they're very different sets of leadership styles and management that you need to get there. And some people prefer to do different parts of that. And so as we've grown, I've certainly learned a lot about myself in terms of what aspects I like. And so we're always, we talk about build, measure, learn a lot. It's what we teach our companies. Don't just go out and start a business. You want to do customer discovery. You want to be really thoughtful about it, then do smaller tests to see if the market likes things, and then adapt. So build it, measure it, and then learn and tweak it. So we've tried to do the same thing, but I think individuals have to do that too. Do I like this part of growing a business? Yes, no, what parts of it? How can I carve out a role for myself that has more of what I like and less of what I don't?
Yeah.
And so that's sort of the stage we're in now.
with some of the challenges that are going on federally, I mean, are you, without ego, and I know you don't have it, are you pretty happy is not the right word, but are you glad that you're in the role that you're in right now because of the stability aspect of it, because of everything, you've got 10 years experience and you can adapt to, maybe this is the hurricane ripping through and you're in the position to help Techtown weather that storm right now. How important is it to have someone with you with your experience at this particular moment?
Oh, experience is everything. I mean, it really is. Having perspective is super important. I mean, I literally had an employee in my office in tears this morning because she feels a little out of control and that the world is, moving really quickly and not in a positive direction in her mind. And, being able to look back on, well, let me tell you what happened during COVID, or let me tell you about 2008, 2009 when we were doing this. And, we read about history and a whole decade gets condensed into a paragraph. And you forget that, oh yeah, there's a lot of ups and downs. It's not a linear progression from bad to good. There's a lot of, two steps forward, one step back, sometimes two steps forward, three steps back. And that can take a year or two or five for those things to happen. So experience is very valuable because you learn lessons. Challenges, of course, you know, still being open to learning and being not never being that guy who says, let me tell you why that won't work, we tried it in 1998. And that's my fear, is that I will be that guy one day saying, get off my lawn, kid, let me tell you why that won't work. And so from that perspective, I'm glad that I've had this experience. I'm glad for TechTown. I honestly, I think if this had happened on my first day as CEO, I would have been in a much different place. But having made it through COVID and some of the recession and being in very difficult situations has prepared me a little bit. That doesn't mean, it also helps in letting me know, yeah, these are some really hard things we're going through right now. They legitimately are. This is unprecedented, at least in my 50 plus years on this planet. To have a federal government that is being dismantled this quickly with so little thought and planning for how it can, the impacts it might have. I'm not arguing whether or not the federal government needs to shrink, sure. But I think, we're breaking some things right now that we don't know we're not intending to break because we're not thinking about how they work. It's like, when you go in for surgery, the doctor doesn't take all your organs out and then start putting them back in. He says, all right, I got this kind of problem. Let me address that and let me know how it's connected to. So I don't accidentally, make your heart stop while I'm trying to fix your lung or your liver. And you can tell I know nothing about how surgery works. Because maybe that is what they do. They take out all your organs. I don't think so. But I watched
Yeah.
ER. That's not what they ever did. So
Yeah, that's true. And ER is the official source. So, well,
everything I know
Ned,
about emergency rooms happened. I learned from ER. Just like everything I know
I'm
from
not.
Hollywood, I learned from Entourage. So
There you go, there you go. And everything about sports you learn from Field of Dreams. I don't know.
Draft Day, I don't know. Pick a
Yeah,
movie. Bull Durham. There you go.
there you go. That's not a bad one. Well, Ned, appreciate it. I think the city of Detroit, the state of Michigan, is a lot better off that you gave up your dreams of being the first man to land in Mars from when you were a kid. So you've done a lot of great work in your career at a lot of different variety of stops and now at TechTown. So tell people a little about TechTown. Because in its name it implies that you must be a technology company, but as I've learned over the years, it is much more than that, and it is really an outstanding place to support all kinds of businesses across the city of Detroit and Southeast Michigan.
Yeah, with a name like TechTown, you think, okay, we're going to do tech, and we do. We help 150, 200 technology businesses every year, and it can be someone who's working on a new mobility company, a new mobile app. It could be medical device, you name it. We're going to help you do it. But a little more than a decade ago, we realized that the same process you went through to start a technology company works for every kind of business. That same build, measure, learn concept. We call it lean startup. And so we will help you start a restaurant, a coffee shop, a barber shop, service, retail, you name it, home-based business. really anything, because we're all about, staying focused on the problem we're trying to solve rather than the solution. And the problem we're trying to solve is generating equitable community wealth and breaking cycles of intergenerational poverty. How are we helping people to make a better life for themselves, for their families, their communities through entrepreneurship? And we've been really successful and fortunate over the last 20 years. We worked with more than 7,000 businesses, helping them go on to raise $420 million to start and grow their businesses right here in Southeast Michigan. And my favorite part is that I walk into almost any restaurant in town, and it's pretty likely they were a client of ours at some point. So I get to go and eat there and call it work, right? It's economic development work while I'm eating really tasty food.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. You guys have several events that are worth attending, and usually every month there's a pop-up shop, and there's quarterly there's opportunities to walk through Tech Town and meet some of the retail companies that are using the services to spur out and become the next big thing. And so I would highly encourage everybody to visit the Tech Town Detroit website and look at their events page and see if you're in the area how you can become involved, because we definitely learned during COVID that small business is the fabric of our country, and the next generation of small businesses are filing through and Tech Town and are going to realize their dreams thanks to Ned and his team.
Well, we definitely learned that they're the backbone of our communities. It's not fun to live in a place that doesn't have walkable streets where you can pop in and grab a sandwich or do some shopping or get your hair cut. I mean, that's the lifeblood of a community, is small businesses. In addition to the economics perspective, I pretend to be an economist sometimes, because of my education, and more than half the jobs, all the net new job creation in this country in the last few decades has come from small businesses. They really are incredibly important from an economics perspective, in addition to the general sense of community well-being and vibrancy that they bring to our cities, towns, and neighborhoods.
All right. Well, Ned, thanks very much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.